This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
The biggest icon in podcasting.
Welcome in, everybody, to the latest episode of Doc and Jock, presented by the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. I am the Doc, John Macaroon. Joining me, my guy, Adam, the Jock Strozinski. Here today to celebrate the Lions finally making the greatest hire. They went out and got the number one guy. Oh, wait. Double check the alert. No, they didn't get Mike McDaniel. Wait, check again. Did they get Jake Peets? No. Did they get Joe Brady? No. Who is actually from the Sean Payton tree? No. Who'd they get? Drew something or other. I'm like, what? Who? What? I was taking the kids to their friend's house. I get the alert. I'm like, that's not Mike McDaniel. And I'm like, they hired Dr. Drew Petzing? What? I'm like, what the hell is going on? And I was like, no. They literally ruined the offseason. Is it possible that the Lions could do this to us? Yes, they did. But look, in the end, everyone's first reaction, we are normal people. We were all like, huh? What? Who's this guy? And then we're like, okay, where's he from? Is he from the Rams? Is he from the Seahawks? Where's he from? From the Cardinals, and he's got a history with the Browns, and everyone's like, take it back. We don't, because I got to ask you, Drew Petzing spent the last 3 years running the Cardinals offense. And look, 2025, it really, in the end, is going to be considered an outlier because the Cardinals fell apart. I feel bad for anybody that had Kyler Murray or James Conner. But in the end, it just comes across on initial surface level evaluation as a safe hire, and maybe not the best hire, but it's a fit in regards to this is somebody. And in the end, we're going to argue it in regards to, listen, I kind of would have liked to maybe evolve the offense just a little bit. You got Tesla, you got Amon-Ra, you got J-Mo, and you got Jahmyr Gibbs. What's wrong with a little bit of razzle-dazzle offense with a little sizzle and steak and sexiness with Mike McDaniel? It feels like it literally, because in my humble opinion, my early reaction is it feels like Dan Campbell's going back to like, we're going to run the 1989 offense and we're just going to pound the rock with Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery or whoever is the number 2 running back. And I'm like, what are we going backwards here? Like, they are literally going like, I'm going to go down and we're going to go down pounding that rock, which is fine. But a lot of teams can have answers to that when needed. So what's your reaction? I know a lot of people were upset because it's not the best true hire. I mean, everybody knows the guru of the LSU offense, Joe Brady's available. But I do think that one caveat we have to throw out there to the audience, I really think a caveat that Dan Campbell put was, I don't want somebody that's going to hop off in 2026. He's like, I want somebody that I know can do the job, but also maybe he's going to stick with me. I think he wiped somebody up.
Yeah. I totally understand that, and I totally get that, right? I get what you're saying. Here's the thing. My initial reaction when I heard this, I was like, who? Who is this guy? And then I was like, wait, he's from Arizona? And I was like, damn it, I don't want Arizona. But then I stopped. I literally stopped a few moments after that, and I was like, okay, let's look at it this way. And you look at what the Lions want to do, and you look at how the Lions want to play. All right. Every year when we have a fantasy football draft, I try to draft James Conner. Let me tell you why. James Conner, for round by round value, right, he's always a steal. The guy puts up generally 15 to 17 fantasy points every single week, running and catching the ball. He is a guy who is dynamic up until he gets hurt. He gets hurt every year. So it's one of those risk reward type of things, right? Like, you're going to pick him up, you're going to use him until he gets banged up, and he's going to end up missing like 3 or 4 days, or sometimes he'll even miss, I don't know, half the season, which was this year. But he's a guy who in their offense is incredibly productive. You translate that and correlate that over That's Jahmyr Gibbs. I think Jahmyr Gibbs is 10 times more explosive, 10 times more elusive, and will be 10 times more effective than James Conner, who is on the downside of 30, constantly banged up, can't stay healthy. He's a guy who struggles at times to find the field. Jahmyr Gibbs is none of those things. You then look at the tight end. Trey McBride's pretty good, right? That guy's, let's say, a top 5 tight end in the league. Checks notes. Detroit Lions have a pretty good tight end when he's healthy, and Sam Laporta. Okay, so this could be a fit. This could really work. Also, that offense, really and truly, this season had no wide receivers, right? You ended up taking and making a guy who was really and essentially a no name, and you end up turning him into a bit of a household name. When this was supposed to be a Marvin Harrison led offense as far as wide receivers go, and that really wasn't the case this year. You ended up getting led by Michael Wilson. Like Michael Wilson was a who? Who is that guy? Legit, he was their third wide receiver, and all of a sudden he's now one of their headliners. He's the guy who's getting a ton of receptions. He's the guy who's making plays out there. So this is a offensive coordinator who's able to take essentially chicken shit and turn it into chicken salad, right? Like Kyler Murray is not a good quarterback. Kyler Murray does not know how to diagnose defense. Kyler Murray does not spend the time studying. It's been well documented. He'd much rather be playing video games than studying a playbook. Kyler Murray is, yes, elusive, can run around, can make things happen with his legs, but he's a diminutive quarterback who doesn't really put the time or effort in. Jared Goff is the opposite of all that. Jared Goff is 6'1", 6'2". He's a guy who one of his strengths are diagnosing defenses. Yes, he doesn't have a cannon for an arm, but he's still got a pretty good arm, and he's got a very good running back. He's got a very good tight end, and checks notes. He's got one of the best wide receivers in Amon-Ra St. Brown, and he's got one of the most electric and elusive wide receivers in Jameson Williams. So I think this could be a really good fit. I'm not telling you it's going to be perfect, and I'm not telling you it is one of those things where you want to go ring the bell and you want to get super pumped up, because it's not Mike McDaniel. Like, that's the guy that we all wanted. That was the guy who was the home run hire. That was the guy who we could say, this guy is going to transform this offense and he's going to make things incredible. I think what they got was, as you said, a little bit safe. But this is a guy who has the ability to pivot and has the ability to accentuate what guys do well. Look, that offense had to be led by a basically a veteran. Like when I say veteran, I mean like a homeless veteran in Jacoby Brissett. Like a guy who they went and they grabbed out of the old folks' home. They're like, hey, can you still play? And he was like, I'm a little bit younger than Phillip Rivers, but I think I can. And they're like, cool, here's some pads. Go out there and try not to throw any interceptions. And you got a little bit of production. On top of that, you look at their offensive line. Their offensive line was missing guys all over the place. So he was able to take a really bad, banged up roster and turn it into something productive. Like when I go through and I look at their roster, right? Kyler Murray, IR. Marvin Harrison Jr., IR. James Conner, IR. Wide receivers, Greg Dorchett, IR. Zay Jones, IR. You go to their tackles, Paris Johnson, IR. Valentin Sien, IR. Will Hernandez, IR. They had guys who were just banged up trying to get through the end of the season. So you look at that offense, and they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 guys on IR who are generally were either part of their 1 or 2 deep. So he's able to sit there and tweak what he has to tweak, which I don't think you got with a guy like John Morton. I don't think you got that with a guy with Anthony Lynn. They seemed like they were very rigid in what they wanted to do and how they wanted to manipulate a game with their offense. He seems like he's a little bit more flexible. It seems like he is able to take what he's got and really help put these guys in a position to excel and succeed. So look, I'm not telling you it's great, and I'm not telling you it's the home run, but what I am telling you is give it a chance. I think this could work. I think this could be really, really good. I like the fact that comes from a different organization. He's kind of been there, done that, seen different things. He has the ability to manipulate and accentuate a run game. He has the ability to work with tight ends. And look, I could see them going out this year and either signing or drafting another tight end. And I could see the Detroit Lions playing with a lot more two tight end set, which again makes the Tesla signing just. I just don't understand. I just don't understand. I forever and a day might not ever get that pick. That's going to be one of those picks where I'm just going to be upset about it till the day I probably die, because it just feels like a giant waste. But neither here nor there. You have a guy who I think is going to make guys on this offense better. I think he is going to be able to put Jared Goff in a spot where they're going to be doing a lot of play action passing, which is what he excels in, what he succeeds in. I think that's going to help open up things for a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs in the run game. I think it's going to help open up things for Amon-Ra St. Brown and JMO. I think expect to see Sam Laporta, expect to see his production go through the roof, and expect to see him on the field for 90% of the offense. Look, I'm excited to see what this could be. That being said, do you think he's going to be a little bit more Ben Johnson, or do you think he's going to be a little bit more Anthony Lynn, John Morton? Because right now, looking at everything I just laid out to you, I tend to feel like he's going to be a little bit more Ben Johnson than he will be a guy like Anthony Lynn and John Morton. Where do you think he falls? More Anthony Lynn, John Morton, or more Ben Johnson?
Well, being that they stood up in each other's weddings, it better be more Ben Johnson. I mean, look, first and foremost, one of my notes is, and it's good, okay, I get it. You have a relationship with Ben Johnson. I'm sure that was brought up in the interview. That would be very appealing. One of my first notes that I took watching the playoffs was I loved how the Bears used Colston Loveland. I was just sitting there going, my God, they just used this perfectly. This is a guy that's balling. He's getting the football. He's open. He's schemed properly. If you can get anything like that for Sam Laporta, that's a plus. The problem's going to be, can everybody eat? Can everybody? That's the same problem John Morton had. And Dan Campbell got it a little bit better, but in the end, the offensive line collapse totally derailed the run game, and it probably pissed off Dan Campbell to the extreme because now you can't do play action, which this guy does a lot. So I do think that in the end, here's what's going to happen. I think that he's got the foundational pieces, just like John Morton did. But in the end, what has to happen, and every offensive coordinator has to get this right, and I think a 38-year-old might take a little time. It's not about, hey, everybody in football can sit there and study and know, okay, the X receiver goes here, he does this against a single high safety. You can try to go in the middle, drag around. Everyone knows that. But what has to happen is how do you sequence the plays? How do you line up the calls that you have? And that's the biggest puzzle of play calling is when do you call the run? On 4th and 5, are you Kurt Cignetti and run your quarterback up the middle for a touchdown? Or are you Dan Campbell and try to move the pocket with Jared Goff and butcher 4th down? Those are things that are most important is how do you sequence plays? And 2025, Arizona, you have to pay attention to because the Lions could suffer an injury. Sam Laporta is one block away from being out of action. So you can't just say, oh, well, this guy sucks when there's so many injuries. Well, unfortunately, hold on. We're going to have to operate.
Does it make you feel any better that up until last year, this guy was looked at as a potential head coach candidate? He was a guy who interviewed for the Chicago Bears job. This guy who has had back-to-back years in 2023, 2024, where his offense was prolific. His offense was outstanding. And yeah, maybe not as many injuries as they've had this past season, but still able to put together a prolific offense and get the most out of a guy like Kyler Murray. I don't know how you feel about Kyler Murray. I don't think
sucks.
he's any good.
No, he's not any
I
good.
don't like him.
Nope.
If he was my quarterback, I would trade him for a bag of balls and an old jock strap. I don't want him on my team. So he was able to get the most out of him and get the most out of that offense. And that offense is great at explosive plays. They're able to sit there and strike and pick up large chunks of yards at a whim. I think that goes back to what you're saying, where he's able to sequence these plays. I think this might be a sneaky good hire.
Yeah, it could be.
And I think it's because of I don't put a whole lot of stock in him and Ben Johnson being buddies and him handing up each other's wedding. I think that's cute. I think it's one of those things where if this goes horribly sideways, I think that's going to be something that we're going to look at and we're gonna end up stressing and we're gonna end up being like, look, Dan Campbell can't get out of his own comfort zone. It's got to be guys that he either knows or guys that knows Ben Johnson or is somehow adjacent to Ben Johnson, and it's going to be one of those things that's going to drive us nuts. So I for the life of me hope this is more Ben Johnson than Anthony Lynn or John Morton, because if it isn't, we're just going to have awful conversations I don't necessarily want to have.
But in my realm of evaluating, I'm just not of the opinion that you just erase a season's stats because somebody was injured. That's how football is.
I agree with you.
Exactly. So it's on the record that he didn't have the best 2025. Arizona fans are like rejoicing and celebrating, and they're all up in the national media comments going, "You guys don't even watch Arizona Cardinals football. Let me tell you how this guy sucks." So I love that perspective, but I think we've been fair at Detroit Podcast, kind of giving you a little slice of the reaction. The fans hate him. The media's like, well, this guy could be the next mastermind. He's got an opportunity to learn, and he's from the North Turner branch and Kubiak and Kevin Stefanski. So there's foundational pieces.
That's the one thing I like about him a lot.
Yes.
Is his time that he spent with Kevin Stefanski.
Should work.
Spent a ton of time with Kevin Stefanski. He spent a lot of time in Minnesota as well. Look, I think Kevin Stefanski offensively is arguably a top 5 offensive guru as far as a head coach. I think he's fantastic. I think the unfortunate thing is he worked in Cleveland for so damn long. And if you look at what he was able to do with Cleveland and with the way Cleveland operated, like, let me put it like this. If Baker Mayfield was still with Cleveland, I think that would be a perennial playoff team. I don't know if they'd win a Super Bowl, but I think it would be a team where they would be dangerous. They would get to the playoffs and they would be contending for the AFC North every single year. You end up trading him away for the massage rapist in Deshaun Watson. You then go into quarterback hell this year where you got Deshaun Watson, who you owe an assload of money to. You've got 2 quarterbacks, one who is not even taller than you or I, and then you've got the Shedeur Sanders experiment. So like none of that is good. And yet this guy was able to keep this team contending for a little bit and was able to help win football games. And the Cleveland Browns have been a complete mess for years now. So I think Kevin Stefanski is brilliant as far as offenses go. This is a guy who spent a ton of time working underneath him and spent a ton of time learning underneath him. And I think that helps add to, I want to say that goes into the pro column, right? I'm giving that a check plus.
Fair. Okay. I'm curious to see now. I'm hoping the schedule starts off a little light in regards to who you get now. Robert Saleh got the Titans, so that's going to be interesting to see because the 49ers did have a
guy, bro.
Yeah, he got success. He had success.
That guy could have been in the DC here, maybe, probably not. But that's your guy.
And now the Giants got John Harbaugh, so our schedule's not maybe as easy as potentially as thought of. So we'll see how it lays out in regards to who we start with, because if you start with another division game, could you imagine if they just put the Lions against the Bears? I'd just be like, oh my God, no. We need a little ease into this. Maybe play the Jets first.
Can we talk a little bit about Mike McDaniel and maybe why that just wasn't going to work? Because look, I think you had a legit shot at getting Mike McDaniel here. I think there was a real opportunity to get him here and bring him as your OC. And then you kind of watched how the coaching carousel just imploded. And all of a sudden it went from being like 3 jobs that were available to then 6 jobs that were available to, hey, a third of the league now needs a new head coach.
Yeah.
And to me, it just kind of felt like he's too good, right? Like offensively,
Yeah.
he's too smart, and somebody's going to take a chance on that guy. And so, do you sit there and wait for all those jobs to fill up, and then possibly be left at the altar where you don't have a guy that you want or a guy that you need because he then gets a job, or do you sit there and take a guy like Drew Petzing and yeah, it seems like a fit. Yeah, it seems like it could work. It feels like he could be Ben Johnson light. Do you go that route? And I think the Lions, starting with what you said, went the safe route, right?
Yeah,
They were
yeah.
like, look, Ben Johnson light, we'll take it. We'll see what happens. Here's the thing, though. I don't know if Dan Campbell gets to hire another OC if this doesn't work.
No, right.
Like you're on your fourth OC. like Anthony Lynn was a disaster. You fired him immediately. Ben Johnson worked out great. And look, I don't know how much credit we can give you for Ben Johnson because that was a Matt Patricia hire, right? Like good on you for recognizing talent and holding him over, but you might not have even known that guy existed if he wasn't already on the staff. To then go to John Morton, and that was an awful failed experience. Who again, you fired him 7 days into it, and you're like, yeah, no, that ain't gonna work. We're gonna need you just to hold the clipboard and maybe draw on this dry erase board. Please don't drool on it. Wear your helmet as well. Thanks. Tards to the back. Thanks, John. Bye. And then I don't know if you get another reprieve if this doesn't work.
No,
so you better hope Drew Petzing works.
Yeah, no,
because
if it doesn't work, then you're not in the playoffs, and then your seat's very hot, and you might end up losing your job. No doubt about it. 6 years is a long time, and 2 years back to back with all the talent that's there. That's just the way it goes. You lose the fan base. It's just the way it is. Look, I do think that was a criteria. Was they did not want somebody probably because look, it just doesn't make any sense. Joe Brady had better statistical success with the Bills. And I just truly think that one of the criteria was what's the level of commitment this person is going to give. And they don't want Detroit to be a hop-off point because it is a big transition. And I think they wanted a guy that they felt like, okay, we can at least get 2 years out of Drew Petzing. I don't think that at 39 and one good year in Detroit with his resume, he's going to get him an opportunity. And they said, look, we'd rather go with somebody that has a fundamental base in the run, that's younger, and also probably has a little bit of that grit mentality. He's like, listen, I messed up and I want to reclaim some momentum so that I can in the future become a head coach. And I think that there is a value that I think Dan Campbell likes in grooming somebody, like having somebody with a lot of brain and wisdom, but just needs a little bit of that fine-tuning, final spice so that he can go on and be a good head coach. Whereas Mike McDaniel is going to come in and be like, I want to do it all, and I don't need to really what's he going to collaborate with Dan Campbell about? He's going to be like, I'm going to run this, and this, and we're going to try and do this and this. He would have been successful.
They can collaborate on their nicotine of choice.
Right. They would have been
Mike
successful.
McDaniel's like, I like these Breeze fruit punch cartridges, and Dan Campbell's like, can I get another Zyn?
Right.
Can I get the menthol Zyn pack, please?
It would have been successful. I would be hard-pressed to say Mike McDaniel, former NFL head coach, ran the number one offense in 2023, would have come here with this weapons and been like, yeah, we're going to flop. Joe Brady, I felt, would have ran the football well and would have been good, but they're going to be head coaches, and they might be head coaches right now. And I think that potentially everybody kind of knows it, and you can kind of sense it. And in the collaborative approach, I do think that they wanted a guy with some loyalty, some ties, and an opportunity to kind of prove himself. And the foundational pieces of like, okay, this guy knows the division. He's probably going to be somebody committed to the run, and we can work with him to be able to. And also, too, there is a tie to Ben Johnson. Like there is a connection to probably wanting to be somebody that is going to be able to call plays well and be aggressive and hopefully learn and grow in that role. And Dan Campbell would find that quite appealing. So Dan Campbell has a type. He's got a type of somebody really smart, has a lot of experience, and has coached a lot of different positions, which is good in that he's coached tight ends. Clearly what he saw with McBride definitely is going to appeal to Dan Campbell. And unfortunately, we just got to be aware that this is a guy that has a type, and he's not going to go for the and also too, cause I said it on YouTube, and it makes sense. It's not even disrespectful to say it. You don't want to bring somebody that maybe 80% of your audience and fan base is going to say might be better than you. So then you got a guy on staff sitting there. If 3 games in, the Lions are like 2-1, 1-2. The offense is a little bit scuffling. Dan Campbell makes one decision on a field goal. And you and I might be like, you know what? Let's part ways with Dan and put in Mike McDaniel. He might be the better coach. And then now you got a whole year distraction of podcasters and content creators and all the media going, what would happen if Mike McDaniel ran the team? And then that's just a whole other distraction. I feel like that's something that, listen, I would do this probably the same thing. Like, wait a minute, do I want to even bring in somebody that people are going to call in the radio stations and say is my replacement? And you don't want to do that, especially in a year when you think maybe you can take major strides with a weaker schedule and you want to put something in place. You want to limit noise, and bringing somebody that maybe right when he gets hired could, and also too, if that's being clamored for, if you're Dan Campbell, you might scratch your head and say, wait a minute, if the collective is like, hire this guy, are they kind of hinting at something that we're not hinting at? Because ain't nobody's going to be calling for Drew to be the head coach. Ain't nobody going to be calling for Calvin Shepard to be the head coach based on what's going on. So there's a dominant hierarchy that Dan Campbell can be the king of the jungle, the king of the castle. And I think that's why too, because think about it. If they, and this lends to our next conversation, do you think that it's a mistake to keep Calvin Shepard when there is a Brian Flores out there, when there are better names? There was a Sal out there, but he became a head coach. There are guys that I think are better than Calvin Shepard right now that could come in and move this along. But if you hire Brian Flores, a lot of people are like, it was an offensive team, and sometimes a tougher team might be able to handle business. You don't want that smoke either. And they like Calvin Shepard, but that defense, cause it might take a lot more work. Like, aren't you jealous seeing Will Anderson and all the interior pressure that some of these other teams were bringing, and jealous of the Patriots in 1 year, one off season? They spent a shit ton of money and they revamped their whole operation, and there's turnovers, and Carlton Davis is making plays, which he didn't do in the regular season, but he shows up in the postseason. So you look at it and you say, you know what? There is this notion of a collective group that works together in a symmetry. But I'm like, you know what? For the Lions, I'm tired of this kumbaya shit. I'm ready for just get me the best defensive coordinator in the world, the best offensive coordinator in the world. And if I got to fall on the sword, but we win a Super Bowl and the next year we stink and you fire me, fine, so be it. For the greater good of the team, I just think going into 2026, does that first move with Calvin Shepard and Drew Petzing, does that scream to you, yeah, we're making that Super Bowl push? You're like, I don't think that's the Super Bowl caliber staff that potentially we're all clamoring for.
To me, it feels like, again, very safe. I feel like the word of the day today is safe.
Safe.
And safe doesn't always work, and safe doesn't always translate the way you want it to work out. So, look, if it was up to me, and I was Dan Campbell, and I was the one who was calling shots, and I had the ability to make calls, I would be interviewing a ton of different defensive coordinators. Look, I'm not saying what Calvin Shepard did was bad. I'm just saying I was a little bit underwhelmed. I feel like if this is a team that is serious about making a Super Bowl, and it is Super Bowl or bust, again, the general manager and the head coach, they said those things, not us. If it is Super Bowl or bust, right? Brian Flores is a guy who is at the very top of my list, who I'm making calls to saying, hey, you want to come in? You want to have a conversation? Let's just get a cup of coffee. I want to pick your brain, see what you're thinking, see what you would do with some of these guys, or a guy like Jim Schwartz. Say, hey, Jim, look, I know that you've interviewed with Cleveland. I don't know where that sits. I know, and it's a little bit of a hot mess there. Want to pick your brain about possibly coming back to Detroit and being the DC here, and see what you'd like to do with a guy like Aiden Hutchinson, and see if you could turn him into a Myles Garrett type. Like those would be my 1A and my 1B, and that's where I would start. Hey, look, you also have to remember, Calvin Shepard's interviewing for head coaching jobs. So whether those are token interviews or not, if he gets the opportunity to take a head coaching job, obviously he should. He should definitely do that. You need to protect yourself. You need to protect your team. So why you're not engaging in different conversations and why you're not looking to upgrade your defensive coordinator position doesn't make any sense to me. To me, the way this team operates and the way this team carries itself, it feels almost as though everybody's part of this little fraternity, right? And everybody is boys, and nobody wants to hurt anybody's feelings. And that's not the way it is. It's a business. The NFL is a big boy business. if you're just okay at your job, which I would say Kelvin Shepherd after this year, he's okay at his job. Not great. He's not horrible. He's somewhere in the middle. If I can go out there and I can upgrade that to good or possibly even great, why wouldn't you go do that? Why wouldn't you take the chance to go do that? You know, look, I would bring Kelvin Shepherd in. I'd sit him down and be like, hey, man, look, we've already kind of talked about what happened this season because they do their little end of year exit interviews with all the coaches and all that jazz. And we've established that it was good, just not really good enough. There are things that have to be worked on. We understand that you're going to go take other coaching opportunities and interview for different jobs. We're wishing you the best of luck. If there's anything we can do to help you facilitate that, great. In the meantime, in between time, we're going to go talk to other DCs, and we've got to do our due diligence just in case you get offered a position and to see if we can maybe possibly upgrade this position. And it is just that real. It is just that straightforward. And yeah, it's a tough conversation to have if you're Dan Campbell. Yeah, it's a tough conversation to have if you're if you're Brad Holmes. But this is the reality of the business. If I have the opportunity to get better, why would I not? And this goes to Brad Holmes and the way he drafts. Like, you have the ability to get better along your defensive line. Why would you not go out and invest a draft pick in somebody who can make an impact? Or, I don't know, go to free agency and get somebody who is very good. They don't necessarily have to be great, but very good and can stay healthy. Not Marcus Davenport, who is Marcus Davenport. You know, I like, to me, the way this organization runs, top down, Brad Holmes, Dan Campbell, to me feels very safe, very paint by number, color within the lines. Let's make sure that we don't upset anybody who is already on our boat. Let's not rock it. Let's not get anybody wet. And to me, that just doesn't work, because we are in it to win it, and you're here to win a Super Bowl. So if you have the ability to go out there and get somebody who is substantially better, and Brian Flores, Jim Schwartz, those two specifically, are substantially better than Kelvin Shepherd, I would go get those guys. It doesn't make sense to me that they do not look to upgrade that defensive coordinator position.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see, because the word of the year for the Detroit Lions, from Brad Holmes to Dan Campbell to the entire front office, is they have to adapt with a little bit of sense of urgency. Adaptation is key. And if you're going to still run man-to-man and put all that pressure on the defensive line, they actually got to do something. Like, you're actually hanging out your cornerbacks to dry if you don't get pressure. No cornerbacks are able to guard wide receivers for 3.5 seconds. It's just impossible. The route trees are so advanced that they can get to a spot pretty quickly. And the Lions, yes, they are able to statistically get sacks and pressures. But when it's the slowest in the league, and quarterbacks have time that are better to get the ball out quickly, you're just going to put everybody in a bad spot. And it has to then become bend, don't break in the red zone. And I just think that, yes, the number one key that everybody's going to see is you got to win with the front four consistently. You got to bring the pressure without having to blitz as much. And then you can get creative that when it comes, you're able to get home. So what happens?
That was probably the biggest thing I took out of watching the playoffs this weekend.
Defensive line speed.
The front four wins.
Wow.
If the front four wins, you're going to win the game.
Yes. And if your quarterback can just, we're not talking about mobile quarterbacks, but if they can just evade pressure, now you got a quarterback like Caleb Williams who keeps a season alive with the throw of the year. And
dude,
it's crazy.
My man was 20 yards deep. Like, that line completely broke down floodgates.
Yeah.
He's running backwards 20 yards and just
flings it
almost a
55 air yards. I was like, oh my God. And people just conflate everything. They just say, well, oh my God, well, Josh Allen had 4 turnovers, and why didn't he evade the pressure? Look, it's not easy to do, but in certain plays, you just got to be able to, when you're playing well, good teams win, and they're able to manage the game, limit turnovers, and it's not easy to go find that person. But if Jared Goff's going to be a statue, it's going to make life hell, because you're going to be behind the sticks, and at least, you know, the Bears had a chance to fight and battle with Caleb Williams, and it's going to be interesting to see what his third-year development is, because year 2 was pretty good. So we'll see about these Lions, but because the momentum's swinging, I think you're seeing it. The Red Wings and the Pistons are starting to garner a significant amount of respect, And in my opinion, I think the Pistons are further along than the Red Wings, and we'll talk about them more extensively next week. The team that really is having some success on the ice and doing some great things, and honored Sergei Fedorov and got some momentum, and they're racking up points, and it's really nice to see. But the Pistons, cause they're tops in the conference. They just beat the Boston Celtics. They're doing nice things. You're hearing about some whispers about, trades for guys like Michael Porter Jr. from the Nets and others and the like. And people are like, well, maybe a trade needs to happen or doesn't need to happen. Let's just credit the team that's there. They're gritty. They're shooting effectively. They're putting the pieces together in a way where what was great to watch with the Lions too was when now a team learns how to win. Now there's the standard, and they can meet the standard by effectively shooting, running the offense through Cade Cunningham, but also getting contributions from Asar and Duncan Robinson when needed. And then other nights you can get it from Tobias Harris. And you're like, you know what? This is not a team that should be taken lightly. I'm very impressed. They're a nice watch. They're competitive. But in my mind, and I'm curious to get your sense of it, I feel like I'm watching a good regular season team. They can space the floor, they play good defense, but what is going to be telling is in the playoffs, you got to be a little bit even more gritty, and you got to play half-court defense. You got to play half-court offense at an elite level because things bog down. And now it's free-flowing. They're able to have the success in transition. They're playing very well defensively. I'm very curious if the league is going to allow them to play their style in the postseason. But that's here nor there. I do think, you know what? I understand those that say add, but I'm also, in my opinion, thinking, you know what? Let's see if this team deserves an opportunity to see if they can get to the Eastern Conference Finals and above. I think the thing that most, and maybe myself would ascertain is you probably aren't going to do great against the teams with the superstars in the finals, or in the maybe Eastern Conference Finals when it's you and the Knicks or somebody else. But you know what? If you get to that point, let's see what you can do. But I do kind of feel like they just need that one more guaranteed shooter. And Porter can drop 28 points. He's been healthy, but he has had an injury history. And, it might cost you a Holland and a first rounder, or Holland and Tobias Harris and a first rounder. It's going to be steep. But to add 28 points a game might be intriguing. Where are you at with the Pistons, and are you ready to roll in with this squad, or should they make a move to go out against some teams with superstars, especially the defending champs?
Look, I think both the Detroit Pistons and the Detroit Red Wings have to be buyers at the trade deadline.
Yeah, good.
Look, I think both teams are playing incredibly well right now. And the Pistons, not as much of a surprise as probably the Red Wings are. I didn't expect the Red Wings to be in this battle for first place like they are. The thing is, when you delve into the Red Wings wins, there's a lot in overtime. That gets a little bit sketch when you get into the playoffs because everything tightens up a little bit. Good that they're winning these games. But the way the Pistons are able to win these games has been absolutely incredible. But that being said, you're going to need more scoring. When you get to the playoffs in the NBA, scoring wins. Scoring and defense win. And the big concern is, are the referees going to allow you to play the type of defense that you play? And if they're going to take away or they're going to hamstring that type of defense that you like to play, you're going to have to figure out another way to win games, and you win those games on the offensive side. You have to go get a scorer. I think a guy like Michael Porter Jr. makes a ton of sense. There's a couple of other names that have been bantied about. What is it? Yari Larkinen out there in Utah. He's going to cost you a ton. So you have to figure out what you're willing and what you're comfortable with giving up. But I expect the Pistons to be a buyer at the trade deadline. I expect the Red Wings to be a buyer at the trade deadline. I expect both these teams to make moves to help bolster the rosters that they have and make noise when they get into the playoffs. This is kind of the way I see this playing out. I think the Pistons, because of where they're at, with the way the East is shaping up, and look, I feel like this team, with their core and with the few additions that they could make at the trade deadline, could be a team, or should be a team, I should say, that will win the East and will get into we'll get into a dogfight when they get into the NBA championship finals. All right. So at that point, if you're going up against an OKC, it's going to be a coin flip. Like, they're obviously the better team, but the way you play, depending on injuries, depending on the ifs and buts, candy and nuts. There's a whole lot of things. Just get there, right? Just get there. It's all you've got to do is get there. So I expect them to make an addition to help this team get there. Floor spacing, shooters, that's what you're looking for. Guys who will come in and don't have a problem necessarily playing defense either. As far as the Red Wings go, when it comes to making a move, because of how Steve Yzerman operates, I think he's going to be a little bit more aggressive this year because this team is showing him something. But I don't expect him to be as all in as, say, the Pistons. I expect him to make a bit of a conservative trade. He's going to look to add a guy or two that has a little bit of term on a contract. He's not going all in for a guy to get him here for 1 year. If he was going to do that, he would have did that with the guy from Vancouver. What was his name? Hughes. We would have done that for Quinn Hughes, and he didn't end up doing that because he couldn't guarantee that he was going to be here after next year, which to me makes zero sense. Like, arguably one of the best left-handed defensemen. He can move the puck, he can shoot the puck, he can bring the puck up and enter the zone. He can do basically everything you want a guy to do. And yet you didn't want to take a chance on bringing him here, letting him play the next year and a half out, and then working on signing a deal either next year or after his contract. But I digress. So I think Steve Yzerman will be a little bit more conservative and look for a guy who has a little bit of a runway with a contract. So don't expect him to go out there and make a superstar deal for a upcoming unrestricted free agent or possibly even a restricted free agent. He's looking for somebody who's going to have at least 2-3 years left on his contract. But they both need to be buyers, and if they're not, you and I are going to have a very, very difficult conversation about what these GMs are looking at and what these GMs are doing and why they continue to sit on their hands and cost their teams chances at playoffs and chances at getting into the dance to win a championship.
Understood. Yeah, it's time. And I think Trajan Langdon might be willing to make a move, and that's why an expiring contract is appealing of Tobias Harris. The way they signed it kind of made it look like they could move it and see if there's an opportunity there. So we shall see, but it's nice to talk about the teams are actually winning, and now the final pieces to go from good to great, and let's see which team takes the next step forward from being good teams, playoff teams that can get there and compete, but also teams now that can compete for championships. So maybe the second half of this decade might be very fruitful for a lot of teams. But you know what team is not going to be fruitful for? The Detroit Tigers, because the agent is just spinning his wheels and there's no update there. It's just constant team report, agent report, team report, agent report. And if you're I'll say this, the Dodgers, cause they're making it something that we got to talk about next week in regards to baseball. They're just like, oh, we want Tucker? And I made a joke at Detroit Podcast, which, guys, listen, if it's ridiculous, you know it's ridiculous. I know that Kyle Tucker did not sign with the Tigers, okay? Stop sending me, no, he didn't. I know that. It was a sarcastic joke that I put that indicated that, you know, this offseason for the Tigers has been ultra boring, and the rich get richer, and the Tigers are building a team. Joy. We'll talk about that and amongst other topics on the next episode. Make sure you follow my guy, Adam, at Adam RSTROZ. Follow us at Detroit Podcast. We'll be here to follow all sports. And thank you for your engagement. It's been fun to rile it up, tell jokes, and to share the hilariousness that is out there. AI is taking over. Y'all are sick. And everybody's been enjoying the new way of finding entertainment in the world of sports. And we'll be here trying to figure it all out, sift through the riffraff, and talk about wins and losses in the world of Detroit sports. I can't wait to fire it up next week with my guy on the next episode of Doc and Jock, which is featured on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
You fucking podcasters. I said don't let them in here.